everyone, and welcome back to Behind the Mask. I'm one of your podcast hosts, EJ, and joining me is Lori.
Hello.
This week is episode 16, which we're calling the Incongruent Mask. Just a friendly reminder that anything we discuss in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or a replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. And I'm going to let Lori take it away because this was her kind of brainchild.
It's funny that you say that because T and I were talking, probably about a month back now. And she goes, Lori, maybe we should, talk on the podcast about, our lives being incongruent or congruent, what that looks like. And I was like, isn't that like a science term? I'm like, I'm not sure I understand, what you mean. And so we talked and I really, first, okay, let's define incongruent. So when I say science thing, it's definitely the chemistry of melting and the other processes that are affected in the components and how they differ. So Erin, you actually had a really good example. What was your example?
Oh, well, for me, I know the word from math.
Right.
Yeah, so I love math and science. So I always knew the term incongruent as in like math. So so in math, two numbers are incongruent when after being divided by the same number, there's a different remainder. Or like shapes are congruent when like a 3x3 square is congruent with a 6x6 square because it's exactly half the size, whereas a 6x10 rectangle is not congruent with a 3x3 square because it's not exactly like double or triple the size. And if you want to look at like where the word comes from, the Latin root incongruent is, so in is meaning not, and congruentum is where we get congruent, and that means suitable or agreeing. So when it's not agreeing or not suitable, that's when you get incongruence.
Oh, look at you using my favorite Latin.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. I love you.
I can be taught.
I just love it. So why are we talking about this when we've been talking about getting behind our masks and ourselves and being transparent? Like, how does this, jive with that?
Right.
And so basically in the psychology world, there's this idea of self-concept. And what it's referring to is about how we think about or perceive ourselves. So we want to be aware of oneself and how we define that. And so there's three things in this. And when they're not congruent, then we're out of line. We're not complete, we're not balanced, we're not whole, right? So you could look at that math and science, right? We're melting. So, which, I think is funny because I talk a lot about, yep, I'm just melting, my brain is melting, or, we talk about having a meltdown, I think that that's what incongruency is within us, within our lives, within our mental and emotional and spiritual and physical balance, right? So three things. We have the perceived self. That's how we view ourselves. Then we have the value that we place on it, which is self-worth. And then you have what you really look like, what it really looks like to see yourself, your ideal self. So you have your perceived self, your self-worth, and your ideal self. And we as humans, we want to feel and experience, behave in ways which are consistent with our perceived self so that we can reflect what we would like to be our ideal self. And the closer those three are, the more consistent we are, and the higher our sense of self-worth. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. So, an example of incongruency within ourselves as patients or clients or people or humans, right, is that when we're not consistent in our mindset. So, if we're not consistent in our mindset, then a person's words are not going to match up with how they're feeling and thinking. So, I could be standing in the grocery store. We've used this one a lot. You're standing at the counter and someone says, "So, how are you today?" You've got like either a tear coming down your face, or your face is, your body language speaks that you're angry or frustrated, and the words come out of your mouth, "I'm fine, how are you?" Okay. No, you're not.
Right.
Your body is not matching up. A really popular example of this is if someone were at a funeral and they just were really struggling, and they started laughing while they're crying or instead of crying, right? Because we wouldn't normally think at a funeral that we would be laughing. That would be incongruent, right? But anyway, so that's my examples of when our actions, our feelings aren't aligned with our actions. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to not be in line with, well, I do I don't now. I'm desiring now to be congruent. I think that most of my life I felt, because of the way that I was raised, the generation I grew up in, there were so many factors, going in to who I became as a young adult. But that young adult was a person who ran away from everything, hated confrontation, would avoid it like it was the plague, and really a person who hid their true feelings, never talked about anything too personal. Like, I would give you just enough information so that you felt like you were getting something, but never was I going to let you really deep inside. Because first of all, I didn't trust you with that information, and most of the time I was running away even from that. I didn't even know who I was because I'd just been bearing it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, I was faking it till I made it, so
Yeah.
long that I realized I'd made it somewhere. I didn't know where. It was definitely with all of these masks on. So as I began to peel those layers away and kind of try to get behind my own mask, I realized that my actions weren't lining up with my feelings inside. And I began to kind of understand for the first time why I got that nickname of Pollyanna. It used to kind of really offend me because I was like, "What do you mean? Don't you think I'm happy?" And I think intuitive people could actually perceive that maybe my words weren't really how I was feeling. I'm pretty good at it. I am a theater major. I can act, and I got really, really, really good. So the average person would just kind of let it go. But some of my inner circle really began to kind of question, and be in a healthy way, in a loving way, not question or doubt me, but just really begin to lovingly question me and say, "Lori, is that how you really feel?" And I'm really glad that they did that, because I don't think, I'm remembering back to when I had my stroke. I don't, having my friends sit beside my bedside and say to me, "Wow, Lori, you don't love yourself." And I was like, "Yes, and then I realized he was right, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't love myself. I didn't even know myself. Not really, because I'd been hiding behind the masks and running so far. And so that's why T and I were talking about this, because, you know, I'm going through bariatric surgery and counseling and I'm making all these healthy changes and doing these things, and I'm like, and she brought up this fact that previously my life was incongruent, but now I'm moving toward congruency, and that's, in my mind, kind of exciting. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it, because I felt like I know I'm not the only one out there, you know. And even if some of us, it's not as deep and intense as mine was, we still can easily get out of congruency, you know. So,
Right.
any thoughts on that?
I mean, when you brought the topic up to me, I was like, incongruence, what? Like, it wasn't a term I was familiar with and outside of the math, kind of the math world. But it makes sense. Like what you were saying, it does make sense. Like I think you mentioned it, or maybe I was just thinking like, walk the walk, talk the talk is different. You're doing one thing, to me, it's in a way like a hypocrite. Doing one thing, saying another,
Yep.
teaching one thing, and doing something else. And I don't. I'm sure there are things like that like fall into this with me, but I'm pretty open as to what I am and what I'm doing, and I don't know. It wasn't something I thought like too much on, like being different on the inside and outside, because I think I've always done my best to not hide who I am, like, and especially because there's like visually, there's no hiding what I look like. So I've tried to kind of always match that, as in, like, okay, I'm just going to own it, own who I am. But there have been times, and like I was going through a lot when I graduated high school. I had no desire to be at graduation, like be at the ceremony. I was like, why do I have to go through this stupid, boring ceremony just to get my diploma? Which I wasn't actually given that day, because our school or our county, when we did it, they would give you just the folder, and then we'd have to go back to the school like the next day or whatever to pick up our diploma, because they couldn't keep track of all of the certificates up there, so kids weren't getting the wrong one when they were handed it. I was like, I had no desire to be there, but I had to put on this like happy face and just pretend like I was happy about being there. But like so many times, even during the ceremony, like one of my friends got like that was sitting next to me, she's really mad at me because the way I was like, oh, is this over? When are we gonna be done? Because I just had no desire to be there. And I think even that, like, that can start to build like in the future. And I struggle with depression and anxiety, so there's definitely times where like I feel like I don't want to be somewhere, I'm tired, I don't want to like be there, but then I smack on the happy face of, oh yeah, I'm hanging in there, how you doing, just trying to, like, I don't know, I guess put on a face, be different. And I think that's just the whole general idea of putting on a mask. We don't, either we don't want to bother with it, or we don't want to deal with it, or we don't want people to think less of us.
Right.
So we just kind of put on that facade.
Yeah. That goes back to that perceived self,
Mm-hmm.
and the real self and the ideal self.
And you were using the explanation of like a funeral. I was thinking when people, like, everybody's like laughing about something, but then somebody else is crying, or vice versa, like everybody's crying about something,
Right.
and then everybody, somebody's laughing, and it's. But I also feel like it goes with like everybody deals with different traumas and things differently. So sometimes it's not incongruent. Sometimes it's just the way they process.
Right.
Because I honestly, there would be times where I probably would be the person laughing at the funeral, because the person that maybe passed away is somebody that we had good laughs and, have humor in that, instead of dwelling on the not so great. I don't know.
Well, definitely. Okay. So I definitely want to, I don't think laughter at a funeral is a bad thing. Sometimes we need a little lightening, right? We need a little humor. It is a great coping mechanism, Laughter is a healing, soothing, even rejuvenating exercise. I think what I was referring to more is when it comes out uncontrollably, and when you like an outburst, or and you almost can't control it, and then you would be crying at the same time. So you're crying and laughing, and right, it's because your body, your mind and heart are like, mourning, going through this stuff, and then you're trying to put on this face, and all of a sudden you're just uncontrollably laughing at something that wasn't even that funny, or wasn't really, might not even be appropriate, right?
Mm,
And so, yeah, that's more what I'm referring to, because I do believe humor
right.
can be an amazing healing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
No,
I
I
know
get
some
that.
people are, thinking Lori's not the humor person, but I do like humor. I
I
just
just.
a little different than the average Joe, I guess. I don't like so silly just to be silly. I'm a little more serious than that. Anyway, whole
A
nother
little more.
topic.
Yeah, yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
Yes.
I don't know. I get what you're saying, and I can see where it's definitely puts things into perspective. Makes you kind of think about it. And I think it's not something that, like, once we fix, it's always going to be better. It's that it's something we're always going to have to struggle with too, because every reaction, every situation is going to be a little different.
Oh, yes. We're going to
And
fluctuate.
oh yeah, and especially around everybody, because every person that you meet, one time you might have to put on that facade, the other time you might not have to, and then it's like, okay, well, what facade? Like, what am I like? And so then it starts to give this like pieces of like self of like, well, okay, well, which one is really me? Because sometimes
Right.
you forget who is really me.
Well, and I'm hearing T in my head, because remember, not all masks are bad, right?
Right.
And everyone fluctuates, as I said, right?
Yep.
There are situations that we regularly encounter where it may not be wise or totally helpful to be congruent. It might not be safe. It might, you know what I mean? I'm thinking about my second marriage, and it was a very dangerous situation a lot of times, right? If I had said or done exactly what I wanted or exactly how I was feeling, that would have put myself and my children in danger, right?
Right.
So there are times I needed to be incongruent for safety purposes. We've also talked about when we melt down in front of the butcher. The poor butcher
Yeah.
is like, I don't know what to do with all of that, and I don't even know this person, but I'm going to paste a smile on my face and tell them I'm
Right.
listening. And right. So we don't, we want to try not to melt down in front of the cashier or the butcher, the McDonald's drive-through, teenager that's like, my gosh, there's this lady out here, and what do I do with her?
Right. Right. You're like, the heck just happened? Yeah.
Right. So definitely we want to, realize that not everything is bad. Sometimes
Yeah.
being incongruent is a good thing. When we're healthy, I think the difference is that we recognize those things and we understand them and use them appropriately,
Right.
And so this is a great time for us to kind of go into, okay, so what does life look like when you're congruent? When you're feeling and behaving in ways which are consistent with your perceived self, ideal self, right? How do we get that higher sense of self-worth, right? Again, in the psychology world, it's believed that when you're incongruent, ultimately you feel bad, you feel out of sync, and that inside of us as humans, we have this innate drive to become more congruent. We want balance, right? Even if, like me, when in your childhood it wasn't supported, or in my second marriage where it wasn't safe, right?
Right.
I still desire to be congruent.
Yeah.
And so, and I think, as I said, under the psychology terms, everyone does. It's part of the human condition, right? And there's this idea out there of self-actualization. So, you're envisioning things happening, right? What brings my body balance, right? Or mindfulness, I've really been working on mindfulness, thinking about what I eat, why I eat it. Is it healthy? Do I enjoy it? Or thinking about concepts of my time? Is this wasting my time, or is this valuing and honoring my core values and beliefs? And the fact that my calendar is going to reflect when I'm congruent with those things, right?
Mhm.
Because I'll be more balanced, I'll be more mindful, and I will hopefully be at peace. Or ultimately, right? I mean, the Bible
Right.
talks about it. There's this peace that passes the world's understanding.
Isn't that a scripture?
Yes.
Philippians 4:7, maybe?
Yeah. Could be Philippians 4:7. Yes. I want contentment that Paul talks about. I want to be comfortable in my own skin. One of the things, with bariatric surgery is I'm kind of in the middle here. I'm coming up on the first year, 1 year of having my surgery, and I'm down 74 pounds, and that's
Yay.
great. Yay. But for a while here, I can't lie. When I look in the mirror, when I put on the clothes, when I go to physically do something, my mind hasn't quite caught up to where I am physically. Or even the other night, we were on in our chronic illness group that we're part of, Aaron.
Mm.
There was a lot of chat about make sure and let us know so we could go and help with babysitting my granddaughter, helping my son and daughter, right?
Mhm.
And guess what? It was so nice to know that people were there, but you want to know what was even more amazing is, and I didn't even get it till after the fact, is that I was there. I did
Right.
those things. And just 2 years ago, even a year up from my stroke, I couldn't have done those things. I was babysitting, puppy sitting, you know, doing all this stuff, and,
Right.
handling phone calls, and, you know, all of these things all at one time. And mind you, it was a little overwhelming at points. I had to reach out. I did.
Mhm.
I called you girls, and I'm like, okay, we should pray. And I just need to share that I'm a little nervous. And, of course, I was
Right.
worried about my daughter-in-law who was really sick.
Yeah.
But I fed my granddaughter dinner, and we played games. I even got down on the floor for a few minutes, which 2 years ago I couldn't have done. So all of a sudden, when I go to reflect back on those things, I'm like, oh, I did all those things. But then, when we're in our group chat, and everybody was like, and I was like, wait, I didn't need all that physical help like I used to need. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so my mind and my body are not quite lined up. And when I look at the clothes that I'm wearing, or how I look, I went to a HOA meeting, and a couple of my neighbors thought it was new, and then I moved in, which is, it's kind of a cool thing. I've bariatric surgery. You can lose your hair. I was starting to lose some of my hair, and I panicked and freaked out, and so I cut it all off. I had 4 braids of 12 inches apiece of how long my hair was, and cut those off and donated them. And so now I look like Tinkerbell's grandmother, but because I'm getting older, so, so there's the gray in there. Someone was asking me the other day, what color do you, if you colored it? I'm like, I just want to go silver. Can we just do silver? That sounds good. I want to do silver. I want to look like a pixie. um I just, but I do want to have some fun with it.
Right.
And I do want to laugh and cry and do all those things, right? But I'm trying, and that's what T was talking about. She goes, Lori, I think you need to start to embrace when you are congruent, when things are in balance, and then seek out those times when you're not, and try to figure out why you're not, and what you would actually want, that desire, right? Rather than, that ideal self. So I'm trying to figure out how to bring the real and the perceived and the ideal and get them in alignment. And so that's why I wanted to talk about this. Any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, so like I know there's times where I've been definitely like feeling different inside than I am acting outside. And you brought up the weight and stuff, and I was thinking back. I've always said, and if I got down to like a specific weight, like anything less than that, I couldn't imagine. I can't imagine myself being at the weight that my age and height say I should be at.
Right.
Like I'm like, that's in the hundred, like the upper hundreds. And I'm like, yeah, no, I would not look healthy if I was down to that weight. And I don't want to go down there. Um, and I said, so I said, like, I think I said 250. I was like, that's where I want to go. And then the person that I was talking to was actually the bariatric surgeon that they were trying to get me to, do bariatric surgery. And I decided not to, but he's like, oh, well, I think you should go less than 250. He's like, I think you can get down to 200. And I'm like, yeah, no, thank you. I think, because I think for me mentally, I will be freaking out if I'm any less than like 250, like, because I'll be too thin. And then it's, because I don't know, like and then everyone's like, oh, but you look so good. Oh, I was like, yeah, no. So for me, it's everybody thinks I could get down there, and maybe I could, but I have no desire to. So then it's like trying to plaster on this. Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate the support that you think I can lose the weight. And, but I'm like inside, I'm like, yeah, y'all are psycho. I have no desire to, yes, I know I need to lose weight, and I know that every pound I lose is going to be healthy for me,
Yes.
but I'm not going to get down there to where I look sickly. And I think that comes like mentally comes from my mom, who, which again is something we learned in our environment and the people around us too, is kind of like it trains us, because she was the same way. Like she didn't like it. She sat around 225 most of my adult life. And then when she got sick and had the cancer, she did lose a lot of weight that second bout of cancer. And she hated looking at herself in the mirror. Like she didn't even want to go into the bathroom because she didn't want to see herself in the mirror, because she was down to like 165 pounds, and she was like lost, her cheeks were sunken in and stuff, but it was because she lost so much weight so quickly.
Right.
So I know there's different factors in that, but even all my life, my mom's saying like, I don't like what I look like when I get down to a certain weight. And, I don't know. To me, it doesn't seem healthy for my body. So those are things I have to wrangle with.
Well, yes, those are all tied up with your relationship with your mother as well. And,
Yeah.
we could do a whole deep psychological dive into all of that. But,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, and then, just in general, like incongruence of like being in a group setting and everybody feeling a certain way, and then I'm thinking, yeah, y'all are nuts.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm afraid to say it, because there's been times like we've been like done a devotional through the singles ministry of the church, and like, oh, well, how do you feel about that? And I'm thinking, yeah, I got nothing from that. And then people are droning on for like 15 minutes about how good it was, how it was a great lesson. And I'm thinking, what, did I miss something? Because I've been sitting here this whole time and I got nothing. And just think like that. And it's like every lesson, every devotional is not going to impact everybody the same way every time.
Right.
So just thinking like, and it's not like even a judgy like feeling. It's just like, I got nothing. Like literally, like I got nothing.
Like, what nugget? There was no nuggets in
I'm
there.
like, he had a good quote. That was cool. Like, cool, And then there's other lessons like, I'm like, oh yeah, this was impactful. Oh, and then I can partake. But then other times I'm like, I'm not going to say anything, because if I say something, people are going to be mad because I didn't get anything out of it,
I promise you nobody would be mad at you. But that is that whole process, right? Of, and I know you and I have talked about this recently, and I'm doing a lot of talking about it because I'm really trying to master it, is faith over fear.
Yeah.
I'm trying really hard not to let my choices and my decisions and my daily life be driven by
Right.
fears of rejection, fears of,
Yeah.
for my safety, fears. Oh my gosh, so many fears, right? We currently live in a world that is kind of drowning in fear right now. And again, not said in a judgmental way. And we're
Right.
not even going to go into
The why.
political and health conversations. And oh my gosh, there's so much we could do. But I think one thing everybody is in agreement of is how divided and how negative our our culture climate is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you would have to be living under a rock not to notice that, right?
Right.
Um, Even if you don't watch the news or, pick up a newspaper or, live in this world. So we are constantly in the process, hopefully. Self discovery is never ending. So it
Right.
just is. Um, there are values and rules and guidelines to live our lives by, and we may have an idea of what we value, but often there's not much clarity behind it. And that's what I've been trying to do is put some clarity behind these values, um, and not just surfacey, I believe, the sky is blue today. Well, yeah, the sky is blue today, but why? And why do I enjoy that? Or why do I not like that? And, what's driving me? So that's what I'm doing. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a couple of ways that I've been learning that we can help ourselves in our daily self-discovery, never ending, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cycles. We can, number one, keep an inspirational journal. So in this journal, you're going to write whatever inspires you, um, whatever encourages you, motivates you, whatever words you want to put in front of that. Because that's a really good way to spend time with yourself and have more understanding of yourself. So you got to be honest, of course, in there. And I say that out loud because, I would definitely, I mean, when you're younger, even those of us who've been journaling since we were young, I've seen the progression in my journals, I think
Right.
when you're a kid, there's always that, right? We have the locks on our journals, right? We don't want
Yeah.
people to read it, right? Even when I was younger, there was no way. I just knew somebody was going to read it. So my journals when I was younger reflect that I had a lot of fear and that because nowhere in there are you going to find much negativity. Even though that I was surrounded by it, it was all going on, I didn't, you, those were secrets and you didn't talk about them and you didn't write about them and you didn't do any of that stuff. Whereas now, sometimes I'll have a journal entry and I'm like, wow, where was I? Like, I was all over the place and I wrote about this and I wrote about that. And,
Right.
um, I wanted to be more authentic and honest and me. And it is. And, I don't know if you're in a situation, God forbid, where it's not safe, then process it all out and then burn it.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Because it's the process of pen to paper or writing it physically down, and that's how we process. It's a very healthy way to process and learn how to understand yourself. So um that's one of the main things we can do. And then we want to know our values.
Right.
So it's a really powerful exercise to uncover your values. Because once you know what they are, then you can prioritize them. And in your daily life, decisions will become easier once you know them. It'll almost become like second nature. Without even realizing it, you will subconsciously start to act more in line with your values.
Mm-hmm.
Your calendar is going to reflect that. Your words are going to reflect that. Your actions are going to reflect that. It's just going to be this much more flowing circle, right? And then you want to walk the talk, right? And it's so funny because I think the phrase walk the talk can be almost overused a little bit. But
I haven't heard that phrase before. I've heard walk the walk, talk the talk, but I've never heard it
well, okay,
walk
so
the talk.
walk the talk because it's just a shortened phrase of
Right.
what you just said.
Yeah.
But we want to walk the talk. Once we have a sense of an understanding of our true selves, our values, then we can set intention every day to live by the congruent thoughts.
Right.
So that's walking the talk. And when we do that, we get to find some balance. We get to find some peace. And we're in the pursuit of contentment, which is, I think, spiritual. It is emotional. It is physically. It is just a healthy way to be. Peace. Yes, it's a good thing. At least I hope so. That's what I'm trying for.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of highlight or mention a couple of things. I know,
Please do.
Lori, you were talking about journaling, and it's so funny because for me, and I've shared this before, actual physical journaling does nothing for me. Like, I've tried so many times to pick up a journal and write in it and like share my thoughts. And the next thing I know, like, I'm writing a story. And so I've gotten to the point to realize the only way I can process is just to like write. And so it doesn't have to be your feelings that you're writing. It can just be clearing your head, because I find that when I write, I clear my head and things become more or clearer, like, because the other stuff washes away, like it makes, like, comes into, like, how I truly felt comes out more so than if I was just writing to write. Because to me, I don't know, I guess I've always felt like, for me, if I'm gonna write something, it's gotta be worthwhile to do it. I don't know.
Right.
That's just me. So, like, there are other ways to journal. Like, some people can journal by physically handwriting. Others can journal by just typing it on their phone. So there's quite a few different ways that you can process. The point is that you do process, that you do take a moment to write down, talk about, think of, like, even if you have to sit in your living room by yourself and talk to yourself, like, even if that's the only way
There
to
you go.
do it.
Yep.
Because everybody's going to be different. It's, because journaling isn't always going to be, my nutritionist, the last appointment I had with her, she'd mentioned journaling and suggested, like, when I started getting cravings for certain things, to journal about it. And like, so many times I've thought, I should probably pick up that journal. And even, it's funny, like, even thinking, oh, I should probably pick up that journal kicks the craving. And, and it's crazy because I made and published on Amazon Kindle, like direct publishing, like a journal for cravings that I printed out and I had sent to me, and I still haven't touched it. Just because, like, I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably pick up that journal. And then I just lose the train of thought and I go on to do something else. And so sometimes it's just like training your mind, like just thinking, I should start journaling. And then, like, even just that trains your mind, like, okay, I need to process this.
Well, it's interesting that you said that, because a lot of my journaling comes in the form of letters, because I like to write letters. So I'm either writing a letter to a friend, or I'm writing a letter, especially if I have something I need to process about sharing with them, or I'm writing a letter to God. Sometimes I write a letter to myself, and you and I are both writers.
Right.
So I think that, yeah, I'm glad that we kind of go into that, because it's electronically may work better for you. You may audibly talk into something, you may, whatever works for you. It's just getting your mind to go through these processes.
Right.
Because if you don't process them,
Yeah.
you're never going to find that peacefulness, that contentment, because and our actions aren't going to end up lining up with that, because we haven't actually processed it. And without processing, it's kind of just a jumbled mess, or
Right.
it's an unrealistic showing of who we are.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you said about knowing your values and prioritizing and stuff, because I think a lot of times it's easy for us to just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah.
And then we kind of lose, like, we'll go with somebody else's priorities just because that's convenient for them, and you don't want to cause waves and stuff. But at some point you have to kind of sit back and be like, okay, well, what are really my priorities? Like, is doing that today specifically like the priority, or something else more important today, and this can be done on another day when we can get together, or things like that. And
Yeah.
I know we talked briefly about, like, and sometimes knowing your priorities is even just knowing what your love language is.
Yep.
Finding out, like, for me it's quality time and physical touch. So sometimes a hug or just spending time with somebody is more important to me than receiving a gift.
Yeah, like mine are quality time and words of affirmation. Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, giving us a gift isn't necessarily like the end all, like,
No. I mean,
but
they're nice, but
yeah, exactly.
but
Like, I'd
no, they don't really
appreciate it.
move me.
Exactly. So, like, and that's the thing, like, and that's good to know about the people in your life. Like, I know Lori, for her, it's quality time. So
Yep.
when she comes to visit, her and I spending time sitting around playing cards, going on a road trip, that's cool for us because we're spending time together. We're having quality time.
Yep.
I'm not just like, she gets here, I'm handing her a gift, here you go. And then, like, oh, that's it. And then I got to go to work.
Right. I think I'd cry.
Right. But then on the other hand, Lori does know that, like, when she does come to visit, I sometimes do have to work. So we have to kind of work it around my schedule. And that's totally fine because she knows that. And,
Yep. And I value those moments we get to
right.
do the quality time. It's yeah. And that's the idea behind quality. It's quality.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be long and right. That actually can get a little unhealthy and border on obsessive.
Right.
But even if it's a 5-minute quality listening or conversation that, sharing with me powerful thoughts, praying with me. Oh my gosh, I love it when someone says, "Hey, you want to pray together?" I'm like, "Yes, I like that. Let's do that." It brings me peace and contentment, and it's another way for me to get that quality time. So
yeah. Amen. And I was giving you a hard time about the phrase, the walk the walk, talk the talk thing. And
yes.
it is true. And I think doing one thing and saying another is just that's got to align, however you can get it, and if that means pulling away from certain people in your life because it's of an influence that they give you that you don't want to have anymore.
You mean having healthy boundaries is a thing?
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Said tongue-in-cheek and sarcastically.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, this past couple of years has really brought out personalities in certain people, and it's like you have to decide, like, who you want to keep in your life, and it's not like cut them out completely, but once you learn, like, their character, just figuring out, like, is that a characteristic you want to have in your life? And like, for me, like, I'm a Christian, but I'm also active in fandom communities. Does my reactions and actions within them correlate to my life as a Christian? Like, does my social media match up with who I am and how I want to be? I do my best to make that, and, make those equal.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, you're never going to be perfect. And I think that's the most thing is out of like,
Amen.
you cannot be perfect. There's only one person, if you're a Christian, that, Jesus is perfect. He's the perfect
Yep,
example.
that's it.
So we will never be Jesus, but we can be like him. We can be more like Jesus.
Right. We're striving for the
Right.
best of the best.
We're training, we're training daily.
Yep.
And I think those are also important, is just to remember that your walk is going to change throughout your life, and it's okay to change your boundaries and your priorities too. When you're younger, certain things might be more of a priority, but as you get older, you realize those aren't really a priority anymore, or vice versa. Like, things that weren't a priority when you were younger might become big priorities when you're older. So it's all has to do with life stages. I do my best to be encouraging online, because that's the kind of person I am. Like, when somebody posts something, I was like, thank you for sharing that. Even if it's just like, hey, just acknowledging it. Like, I want to be encouraging. I want people to know that, like, when EJ talks to them, they're being sincere and not just putting on a show. Like, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
And if that person online met me in person and I acted the same way, I wanted them to know, like, oh yeah, she's the same online as she is in person,
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, what's important, is that we can get to a point in our lives where we share our boundaries and our priorities, and they align with what we're showing to the world,
Yes.
And that's what this whole discussion's been about, is coming up and just realizing, the masks we put on can make us feel one way inside and then act a different way on the outside. And that's when our masks cover up and hide things from us.
Right. And they're not healthy.
And like Lori said, earlier, T has reminded us, some masks are not unhealthy. It's okay to have certain masks for protection and for other reasons. But in the
Polite
general
society.
Yeah. Or professional boundaries, like, you're not going to
Right.
go talk about your personal problems at work.
No.
But, and so there are masks and boundaries you have to put down. But, even then, like, those change over time depending on your environment. So just remember that, everything is kind of a learning process, a growing process, and things can change, and that's okay.
Amen. It is a daily intention of process. And so my counselor, I hear him speaking in my head, I'm a self and clinically diagnosed perfectionist. And it is one of those things I'm working on. And, he's like, how many, I did in one of our early conversations, I'm like, every time you say that, it's like nails on a chalkboard, And he's like, oh my gosh, now I know exactly what to say every single time, because I need to get you to get this concept that failure is not bad, that self-love is a real thing, self-care, all these things. He goes, so I'm going to keep talking about failure, and I'm going to keep talking about forgiveness and grace and all these things so that you can get them for yourself. And that's, for me, it is a daily thing. I am just a wandering soul trying to seek out that congruency, that contentment and peaceful life. And again, even with peace, it doesn't mean that everything is perfect. You still have obstacles. You still have growing, learning opportunities. And so, yep, these are the things that I am trying to be congruent with and find that mask, that healthy whole mask where it all comes into alignment. So I think this has been a good, fun, deep, little serious bit of conversation, but so maybe next time our podcast will be a little lighter.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. we seem to have some interesting ups and downs, but you know, I think it's good to have some fun and then some, serious topics too,
Oh, I'm a girls just want to have fun. Yeah. We're gonna have to break out and dance one of these times and try to do it. No.
Okay. With that, we're celebrating 1 year of doing the podcast now. This is
So exciting.
like, I don't remember. Like, I remember when we started, it was like, is this going to happen? Like, are we going to actually do this? And then we did. And it's like, okay, we're coming up to, this is a year since the first published of the episode. So
This is great.
yeah. Just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or a replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. This episode is available on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as BehindTheMaskPC. If you don't use social media, you can email us at BehindTheMaskPC@gmail.com. Feel free to review us on Anchor, leave feedback on the platform you listen to us on, or message us through our social media or email because we'd love to hear what you think. If there's a topic you'd like to hear us talk about, feel free to message us and we'll see about making it happen. You can find EJ on Twitter and Instagram as EJ8302. And if you'd like to keep these episodes coming, you can also monetarily support us by visiting anchor.fm/BehindTheMaskPC/support. And on behalf of the ladies and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.